This is Scott Talks, and we're talking with David Manheim.
Manheim.
God damn it.
It's close.
And we're talking with David Manheim. I just asked you that.
It's okay. I like it when people call me the Dominican guys I work with at Katz's all called me David Manheim.
Okay,
which
Mayhem.
I thought was cool.
All right. I mean, I think if we were friends, I might call you Mayhem just to sort of be as a joke. But
that would be like the coolest nickname I could ever have.
And you are the creator host of the podcast Dopey. And you just had a really, I think, awesome conversation with Laura about your journey and the loss of your friend Chris, who was the co-host for many years, and then you kept on doing the show, and we were just 2000. You were saying 2002 to 2008. You don't really remember that time period in your life, huh?
I don't remember a lot of my life. It's weird. I think memories in general are weird because it's easy for me to act like I don't remember stuff, and then they kind of come back, and they go away, and they come back. And I have like a lot of lowlights of living in L.A. Like I did a lot of like dumb stuff and dangerous dumb stuff in L.A.
And you loved heroin?
I loved heroin.
You were not really a drinker, or
no? I barely drank.
Barely drank. Yeah. You loved weed.
I loved weed. Yeah.
All right. So I hated anything that slowed me down.
Yeah.
I loved alcohol and cocaine. Were kind of my favorite.
Right.
Weed smoker until that got in the way for the heroin and the cocaine and the alcohol use. So we were different.
Well, it's all brain chemistry.
Right.
It's like, what is your brain like, and it's like, how does another substance regulate your brain? Like, and I think it's fascinating
and get you in that space that you need to be in.
When I did coke, I just felt like nothing. Like I think I'm so high strung that coke like didn't touch me. It just made me uncomfortable. Right. It didn't give me any good.
You were the high strung New York Jewish guy who needed to come down.
Yeah,
I was the super mellow kind of stoner guy, wake and bake kind of guy who loved the uplift.
I wish I loved coke. I mean, it's probably for the best that I did.
Well, I like you. In your story, you talked about not finding needles until later because you were scared of them, and I was scared of cocaine the same way because I felt like it was going to elevate my drinking to a way that, and it did. It set me into 4 or 5 day runs where I came out of it going, "What?" My life was completely different before it started than after. But it got me to where I needed. I guess I got lucky enough to get in that rehab where I ran into Laura.
Yeah, it seems like it really worked out for you guys.
Yeah, it sort of did. And so I mean, and I'd been to a few rehabs before that, but I think I just reached a point in my life where it was kind of like, just saw that teetering of the sides. What was the turning point for you? When did you sort of, like, you started the podcast, and you were even saying at the beginning of the podcast you were kind of resentful at sort of recovery worlds.
Sure. I was very uncomfortable with the principles of recovery in general. I got sober because I just got this, and it's like I almost felt like it's a cliche to talk about shame. And I never really owned my shame too much,
right.
But I got sober because I was so ashamed of my parenting. Like
you had the kids.
I had one kid then,
one of the girls,
and I would visit really high, and I wasn't allowed to visit without my dad.
Yep.
And I was so ashamed of that I was like, I got to get sober, and I got a year just so I could get overnights, with my older daughter, and then I started smoking weed again, and then me and my wife tried to put it back together, and I wound up relapsing on benzos really hard, and she was like, "You're losing your custody," and I got I got angry. I got desperate, and I remember it very well. One night, I wrote her an email saying, I need to have my overnights and I need to smoke weed. I'm just one of these people. I should be allowed to smoke weed. It suits me. I'm creative. I'm this, I'm that. I need it.
Some good reasoning there.
I don't know. It was pathetic. It was one of the more pathetic moments, and I saw myself writing the email, and that's when I had my whatever moment of clarity, a spiritual awakening, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I went to a meeting in the morning, and that's when I changed.
And what was the change? And initially, what would you think?
I saw my hands. It was probably August 13th in 2015. It was probably 90 degrees in my kitchen on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I was sweating and chain smoking Marlboros, and I was like writing this desperation email, and my hope was that I would get to have custody and smoke pot. And I think I was 41. I had smoked weed every day for 22 years or something, and I was like, I just had that moment where I was like, what are you doing? Like, how can this be what you're begging for? Wow. I was a waiter, right? I was a waiter in a deli. Yeah. I was subletting an apartment, and I was begging to let me stay mediocre to horrible. That was my plea. Let me raise our daughter, and I
deserve to.
Yeah, I deserve to smoke pot and live this life of, mediocrity. I was below me. I was looking up at mediocrity. Whatever.
Shooting for it.
Yeah, I was sub-mediocre, saying, let me live this lifestyle. And I went to a meeting the next day, and I went to a meeting the next day, and there was some handsome kid who's 28, and he was hipster guy. He had tattoos, and he was celebrating 10 years, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
Right, 28.
Yeah, I was like, give me a fucking break.
18.
Yeah, he's sober 10 years. And I went up to him after the meeting, and I was like, dude, you're fucking annoying. Because I was like, I just had to tell him. And he was like, oh, he was so nice. He was like, oh, how much time do you have? And I was like, none. And he's like, well, do you have today? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, maybe today's your first day? And I was like, holy shit, maybe it is. And then I went home and I gave away all my weed, and it was my first day.
Wow. That's a great story.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
It's weird that is my story. That is I can't believe that's a true story.
Yeah, that's interesting that kid took your confrontation as an opportunity for kindness.
Yeah, he had a good program.
Yeah, he did. He's solid, right?
I know.
Or he just caught it the right way at that moment.
He had his shit together, and I was a jerk off, and he was like, and he flipped it. He did that recovery judo on me, and it worked.
That judo is pretty magic, isn't it? Yeah. So, I haven't listened to the show, but I'm very curious.
How dare you, Scott?
I know, man. It's
you
just
should
that
never admit to that on the show.
Why not?
I don't know, because it makes me feel bad. Like, why didn't listen?
Well, she listened to a bunch.
Okay,
so
good.
She'll turn me on to the ones to listen to. But I think,
nobody should listen to the show.
Well, I'm very curious. I think talking about the way it used to be a lot, and talking about recovery is a fine line, I think, in the world. So, where do you feel like do you just allow the guests to sort of find their own way, or do you lead them into? No,
I lead them hardcore.
Yeah,
and I like the shows that have the old spirit of the show. I believe in it. Last week we had a woman on the show. She was actually featured on This American Life also. She was a IV drug user, and there's something called Never Use Alone. And Never Use Alone is when you call this hotline before you shoot fentanyl or heroin, and then if you're unresponsive, they call the paramedics. And basically, she shot fentanyl in her neck, called Never Use Alone, and died, and they saved her. And I kind of copped.
I actually just saw the clip of that, so I did see a little bit of that. You were there's a
Kimber.
Yeah.
So we had her. We did one episode with the EMT and her, and then we did another episode where she came to my dad's house and we recorded, and her story is so gnarly and crazy, and she tells the stories just like me or Chris would, and that's my favorite kind of show.
That's great. I think it's important for people to hear it that way,
But I also like having experts on, and I also like having family members on. She reminded me of Chris, so that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Do you think it's hard for people to hear stories like that?
Maybe. I always tell people not to listen. I don't know. I mean, that's not my business. My business is to make Dopey.
Well, I've always found it interesting or easy for people who've been through it and gotten to the other side to talk about these things and have a little laugh about it. And other people are in shock when they hear it.
It's like if people, that's a good question, though. I like that question because it's like, and I like to be like, if you don't want to hear it, don't listen. You know what I mean? And more than that, and I'm going to get a little aggro here, it's like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to hear about it. And not fuck you, Scott. Just like,
it's okay. But I haven't listened to the show, so you're
probably not going to like it. But I mean, like, I don't know, like, that's like, because I'm such a kid. Like, I'm going to be 50 in June, but I have this ridiculous defiance in me that I just want to, like, give the middle finger to the audience who says, why would you do this?
Right.
And it's like, and then a minute later, it's like, okay, you don't need to listen. You know, like, my dad, right? My dad shouldn't listen to Dopey. He does. He mostly wants to hear himself, and he wants to be supportive. But, like, it surprises me that people listen.
Yeah.
It surprises me that we got as far as we did.
Well, you know, I think there's a sort of a draw to the truth. Even if it's hard to listen, I think people are like, they can't pull themselves away from it. And I know when I first got into recovery, like, how it was like, I love that shit. I would go to meetings just to hear people talk about what they had been through and how they had gotten to the other side of it. Mostly what they had been through.
I think we don't have a lot of solution on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because the show is never designed to help anybody. The show is designed to be entertaining. The show is designed to be entertaining. It was designed to have a laugh. That was what it was designed for. And I think in my heart of hearts, as a producer, you know, as the architect of the content, I want it to be entertaining. Like, I don't, that's what I want it to be. I mean, like, in this world of podcasts, you can have a podcast with solution that doesn't necessarily have to be entertaining, that can be helpful. I just never wanted to make that show.
Yeah. Well, it's really fascinating, and I think you're actually one thing I'll say about it. I think that your sobriety in the show actually represents something. I think people probably recognize your presence as a father, your continuing to move on past Chris, your commitment as it sits in there even if you don't want it to. I think.
I'm talking shit because, like, every other show I'm talking about recovery.
Yeah.
Like, my sponsor's like, you need to put more God in that show. Like, I work a 12-step program. I sponsor people. I pray every day. Like, I mention it. Like, I do put recovery in, and I can act like I don't, but I do put recovery in because I want people to know, like, that I can do a show about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit, but still be sober and work a program, and it's part of it. I talk a good game, but I'm a big softie.
Are you conscious of having people on the show that are loaded? I mean, if somebody's loaded on the show now, are you like...
nobody's loaded on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, Todd, who Laura and I talked about a lot, he was loaded on the show, and there's a guy who I have on the show fairly regularly named Jay, who we call Fentanyl Jay. Is in active addiction. But he's so entertaining that I have to have him on.
Yeah.
Well,
I applaud you, man. I think it's super entertaining, the idea of it. You're a wonderful guest. And
thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming out and being on the show.
That's it?
That's it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.